Welcome to another episode of the Little Marketing Podcast, where we provide you, Australian small business owners, with smart and tangible marketing advice for your small business. So it doesn't get any more small business focused than today. Our guest is Alexi Boyd. Now, she's the founder of Small Biz Matters, and she was also the CEO of COSBOA, which, according to my notes, is the Council of Small Business Organisations Australia, whose role simply is to promote Australian small businesses to government and media. And you can imagine Alexi has, dealt with a lot of the big names in government, in business and media. So we're really excited to have her on the Little Marketing Podcast today. She's going to share a few things with us. She will share a little bit about how COSBOA helps small businesses, what she's learned from a small business perspective in her career, and also what she's doing now as the founder of Small Biz Matters and how she's helping small businesses. So before we kick off, just a bit of an intro on Little Marketing if you're a first-time listener. So we're an Australian marketing consultancy that's been operating for 15 years, essentially helping small business owners with their marketing plans and advice. And you can imagine in that time, we've learned so much about business owners, their mindset, marketing, what works and what doesn't. So these podcasts are in line with the Little Marketing vision of helping business owners just like you achieve the best possible results for your organisation. So let's get into it. Alexi, how are you?
Hi, Michael. Absolutely delighted to be here. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure. How's your week been?
Yeah, good. Productive, busy, as all small businesses are. And just looking forward to the future and looking forward to new opportunities and all that usual rhetoric.
Excellent. I love all the positivity. So that's a good start to the episode.
Yeah, I think in the current economic conditions, that's what you've got to be, and it's what small businesses are good at. And we've got to keep our chin up and keep going.
Agree. So maybe tell everyone a little bit about you, your background, and what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So Small Biz Matters is a little creation of mine. It began as a radio show, much like what you've got now. And basically it came about because I felt that nobody was really speaking for small businesses and advocating for them in my local area. We didn't really have a chamber of commerce that was worth its salt. And the council wasn't doing much to think of small businesses, even though in Hornsby, we have over 13,500 registered small businesses in the area.
Yeah, wow.
So I felt that, if you want something done properly, do it yourself. And I was thinking about this the other day. I was actually at the Mayor's volunteer Christmas party because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are in small business who are also serial community volunteers, because that's what we do. We help the community. And I was doing a lot of work for my local school, and I was at this volunteer Christmas drinks, and I was really chuffed to be there with the mayor. It was great. And I bumped into a lawyer, a local lawyer who had been running her own podcast, giving legal advice to the community for about 10 years on this local radio station called Triple H, which I'd never heard of. Shame on me. And then I sort of sat in with her a couple of times and started doing this thing with the breakfast crew, which were a couple of 20-something-year-olds. It was hilarious. And just giving business advice. And at the time, I was running a bookkeeping practice that specialised in small and micro businesses. I didn't really look at a particular field. I was just interested in helping lots of different people, lots of people in Hornsby and beyond. And I knew that the sort of questions I was being asked constantly by my clients: how do I pay someone properly? How do I make sure that my staff are safe? How can I plan for the future and look at cash flow? Am I getting my GST and superannuation right?
Yeah.
And where can I get really good advisors in other fields other than what you're helping me with, which is bookkeeping? So I started talking to the 20-something-year-olds about the sort of advice and then people would ring in and ask questions, and half of them I could answer and half of them I couldn't, and got involved with doing my own show soon after that. Sort of evolved into my own program, and awesome. 8 years later and 220 podcasts later, I pretty much interviewed a lot of different people. But interestingly, and I'm sure you find this with your podcast as well, you don't tend to repeat a topic because there is so much to talk about.
So true.
So much that small businesses need to know. So I found, I'd have someone talking about exporting into the New York market one week, and then I would talk to someone about commercial asset finance and borrowing the next, and then it would be marketing, and then it would be legal, and then it would be HR. So there's always things to talk about. And I really enjoyed servicing through that volunteer work my local community. And it was because of that reputation that I built for being an educative podcast rather than media one that was attacking the government for what they were doing, that I developed relationships with organisations like the ATO and COSBOA and the Small Business Family Enterprise Ombudsman, and links into Canberra and into that government regulation community.
Wow. So it all started from a podcast.
It all started from a radio show.
From radio show.
Radio. And I'm still really passionate about community radio. I remember I was interviewing a fairly senior Liberal politician once, and she was in charge of small business at the time. And we were doing the podcast, and she went, "That was really great. I really enjoy talking to you. And I really enjoy talking to community radio." And I turned around and I said, "Well, how about you fund it properly then?" Anyway. So I get quite passionate about it. It's a wonderful community service, and it services a lot of multicultural needs. Sporting guys are really passionate about what they do, keeping local sport and community sport broadcast. There's great music shows, local music. So it's just a great local community like foundation of information and wealth of knowledge from local people. A lot of people who just like the sounds of their own voice, like me, but people who are really willing to give to the community as well.
Yeah, okay. And so then so you touched on COSBOA then. So how did you go from that into the role as CEO of COSBOA?
A little bit of being in the right place at the right time, but mostly just building up that reputation of someone who's really passionate and really, I guess, genuine about their advocacy. And I think in government in particular, people can be quite wary about organisations that pretend or are fronts for advocacy, but so many of them and so many of the COSBOA members and so many of the industry associations are incredibly passionate and often run by volunteers.
Yep.
Incredibly passionate about their work and what they provide and the small businesses that are part of their membership. And there's a lot of them that advocate quite strongly and quite genuinely for their cause.
So what did COSBOA what do they actually do?
So COSBOA is the, I guess, peak organisation for small businesses in Canberra in particular. It's a national body and its members are small business are associations who represent different industries who have a majority of small businesses. So that may include people like the Hairdressing Council, the Australian Meat Industry Council. You've got news agents there. We've got the Pharmacy Guild. So a lot of small businesses within community that are represented by these organisations. And it's through conversations with government that COSBOA advocates for the needs of small businesses. But what makes COSBOA unique is that they only talk about small business. They don't advocate for big business or for industry or for other groups within when you're talking about business situations. They're just talking about small business.
So let's use an industry that I don't know much about, hairdressing. So a hairdressing association, say the president or the chairman, you have some conversations with them. So what would be kind of some typical, generic conversations or problems or things that they'd want to have addressed by government, do you think?
Well, quite often it's dictated by whatever the government's agenda is happening on the day. And what I've always said is that whatever policy decisions government is making, it all affects small business. It can be everything from workplace relations, which is obviously very effectual for small business, but any tax changes or things even affecting the price of fuel as it comes in and out of the country, or their export markets as they're negotiating with other countries for trade deals. All of these things flow through and affect small businesses. It's not just about tax and superannuation and what you pay people. We all know, and everybody listening to this knows, that running a business is really complex. You've got so many things, so many hats that you have to wear, and you have to be across not only how to run your business and do it well and your widget and what you're fantastic at, but a whole lot of other things that you may or may not even realise are part of running a small business in this country, particularly when you begin to employ people. So COSBOA, through its relationships with fabulous organisations like the Australian Hairdressing Council, will listen to those members and say, this is what our small business members are saying. They are saying that this is a problem. We can't employ people because the award wage is going up. Every time there's a lift to the cost of workers, it becomes an increasing cost for small businesses. And I guess it's taking that piece of information and making it make sense in a media-centric conversation, but also in a government conversation. And I think one of the strengths of COSBOA is constantly reminding government and policymakers and those who make the decisions that in fact small businesses are not just some rhetoric backbone of the economy. They're more than that. They are actually the biggest employer collectively. They are often the ones who are keeping communities together. If you look at disaster situations, it's not the big businesses that come in straight away and start handing out food or offering people free water or offering people shelter within their organisations. They simply can't move that quickly. They've got the small businesses are agile and fast and are there in the community and are often living in the community, employing local people, and they're the ones who can move the fastest. Yeah. So there are so many facets to small business, and there are so many policies that affect them, that an organisation like COSBOA is critical to really make that jump between understanding what small businesses and how they're impacted versus what government thinks it's doing to help, and how that may not be connected.
Yeah, okay. So you're the one that to pester government, or you used to be.
Yeah, exactly. So, the COSBOA role is to constantly remind government of the impact that their regulation decisions can have, and how to make good policy that actually keeps in mind the practical. See, when you make a piece of policy that affects all businesses, you will have an HR person or you will have an IT cybersecurity person in a large organisation whose role it is to understand that, make the change management happen, make sure everybody in the organisation who's affected by that regulation is trained and looks at a long-term plan to make sure it's implemented. That all happens by the small business person themselves.
Yeah.
All of those changes happen, and like I said, every change, it's not just regulation. It can be things that the government is doing to try and improve a particular area, like a local government area, for instance. And small businesses need to be across all of that, and it takes time. And change management with small business is hard because it is always that small business person who is doing the change management themselves.
Well, I'm sure COSBOA, we're lucky to have you as a CEO, because you can just hear how passionate you are about it.
Yeah,
and that means a lot.
Thank you. Well, there's a long line of really fantastic CEOs at COSBOA who have come from that background, and I think that's what makes COSBOA authentic, is that it's people who have lived, slept, eaten, breathed small business that really get it, over and above the understanding of perhaps regulatory changes or policy, or it's about that advocacy piece, and I think that's what its strength is.
When I hear politicians who used to have their own small business, I always love that, because it means that they get it. And if they've come from corporate background, it's a bit different. But if they've been in a small business, they know the details of what it means to make and run a small business and grow it and manage staff and pay the bills and ATO and all those facets that you just rattled off. So I think we can get more politicians that have had a small business background. That would be perfect. I don't know how realistic it is, but that would be perfect.
Absolutely. And not only having your own small business in the back and having known in the history of your working life what it's like to run a small business, or even just work in a small business, but importantly to keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening with small business in your community. So every single politician, they should and they do know their community intimately. They've got those connections, but what they need to do better is they need to do better at talking to their local small business groups. That may be a really strong chamber of commerce. It might be just a small chamber of commerce. It might be a local accountant who is running some events for free out of his offices because he cares about the local community and its economic thriving. It could be an excellent economic development officer on council who is the glue, the connective tissue that is holding all of those small businesses together in that community. It is critical that politicians keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening with small businesses in their community. Too often they get bogged down with just talking to groups or advocacy groups or people who are equally as passionate about what their cause is that they're fighting for, but they need to always put small businesses at front of mind and talk to them and say, we're thinking about doing this, or this is our policy, or this is what we're going to do if we get elected to government next time, and actually treat them as a sounding board and find out what that means. Because if you can't articulate what this policy will mean to them and their business, and if we take Hornsby as an example, if you can't articulate and understand what your policy means to the 13,000 businesses in your area, then how can you do that for the whole country or the whole state? And it's really important. They've got to have that connection and genuine understanding, not just, hate to say it, but not just sycophantic discussions where people are just excited to be in the room with them, but genuine engagement where they're talking to them over long periods of time. And that's I think, even more important than having run your own business. Because if you've run a business 20 years ago, regulations kind of changed a bit since then, and what you have to do, it keeps moving on an annual basis. That's why people have advisors like marketing experts and accountants and bookkeepers and finance guys. That's why we need them, because it's a moving goalposts all the time.
Absolutely.
You've got to have that connection into your community and your businesses now, not just what you were doing 20 years ago, which is also very important.
For sure. So let's talk about what you're doing now. So Small Biz Matters. So tell me the purpose of that business and who you're helping and what you do.
So Small Biz Matters is now about to be rebooted as a radio show and podcast. I'm really excited to get back to my roots again.
Great.
It's going to be less about how to and running your business and where to get advice and that sort of thing. And we're going to take more of a policy focus, because one of the things that I'm really passionate about is getting small businesses to engage with what's happening with the very people who make the decisions that impact them. Now, that's a very for some people, that's a real stretch, and that's really difficult to understand. But the more small businesses and small business leaders we can get to connect with those decision makers and to understand how policy and advocacy works and where to get help and where to get advice, and the importance of associations, because they're the ones who often speak for you and your business. Yep. And the more we can get businesses to understand that landscape, I think that we'll get better connections again with government, and then organisations like COSBOA and the industry associations will be even more versed in what small businesses want. I want to see some more small businesses connect with that world, because that world is so, it impacts them on a daily basis. So that's the plan of Small Biz Matters moving forward. And then also I do a lot of consultation work. So I work with government, not-for-profit organisations and corporates, basically advising them on small business policy. What's the landscape right now for small businesses? How are they feeling? What is government doing in the small business space, and how is that impacting their time and their ability to run their business? And also, what's the economic lens that small businesses see the future in? And that's really important, because if they're the biggest employers, if they're critical to the economic future of a particular community, then we need to understand what they're thinking and how they're planning moving forward. And right now, as we all know, a lot of small businesses are just treading water, and they're just trying to keep their head above water because of all the complexity that's being pushed onto them, and also all of the changes and the economic conditions where people are really starting to tighten their belts. It's tough out there.
So with the Small Biz Matters, so you said you're going to go back to kind of roots of podcasts and I guess educating small businesses. So is there a particular industry that you want to focus on, or is it wide ranging?
No, it's definitely wide ranging. I think that if it's like with all things, if you niche, you cut off your foot to spite your face. I can't remember what that expression is, but you often you don't want to tighten your market. And I think that there's a way to converse and speak with small businesses that is a bit generic. Yep. We want to see policymakers continue to go down that path of just talking homogeneously to the small business community. But there are certainly things that we can explain and get those connections happening with the small business community and government to improve the way they design policy, for example.
Yeah, okay. And is there, obviously as the CEO of COSBOA back then, the founder of Small Biz Matters now, what do you think, if we look at kind of the marketplace at the moment, what do you think the biggest kind of two pain points are for running a small business at the moment?
I think the current economic conditions are really, really challenging as interest rates. And this is the thing, we always speak about interest rates rising and home loans going up. But what we need to see more discussion around is the fact that business loans are also increasing in cost. So if you are a business owner, and many people are, who are leveraging off your house in order to borrow to increase your business and improve your business and increase capital, you're actually sort of paying those costs of both of those loans are increasing, and that's a real double whammy for small businesses. So I think the interest rates is a major component. Another big problem at the moment is energy and that increasing cost. For many small businesses who use a lot of energy, they are already at that critical point of starting to really, yes, shop around. And I get very frustrated with government when they say, you just need to shop around. I said, well, it's not that easy to shop around, even as a consumer. If you're using some of those energy comparison government websites, that can be complex. If you have less time than a consumer because you're a small business owner, that's even harder. But for those who are paying the ultimate price, and that is one of their very, very high inputs, they're just seeing those costs increase and increase, and we could lose a lot of manufacturing, a lot of people like I'm trying to think, car support services like panel beaters, people who use a lot of energy in their business on a daily basis. And they don't have the ability to put solar panels on their roof, or they can't install a battery because there's simply not enough space. It's a really complex market. And I think what policymakers need to do is consider the decisions that they make with a small business lens, thinking about the small business that is part of a shopping centre or part of an embedded network, and how does it work for those in the ag sector who are not only expected to put transmission lines through the middle of their property, but also they have to transition from diesel machinery into electric machinery, and those products may not even exist yet, let alone the access to the energy. It's a complex situation, and I guess the call out here is saying, if energy is one of the major inputs and it's only going to increase for small businesses and their back is already up against the wall because of other economic conditions, you need to factor in their needs and what they need to hear, and the timeline of expectations moving forward. You need to include all of that information when you're thinking about policy design.
Yeah, and it's what you were saying before, right? Every decision, regardless of whether it's interest rates or whatever, or energy, or every decision that's made will somehow filter down and impact the small business owner in some capacity.
Exactly.
So if we talk mindset, so that's the issues and the pain points. So if we talk mindset, you would have spoken to thousands of small business owners. Tell me what the positive mindset people are doing to overcome all that kind of negativity out there. What are they doing differently?
Well, I think the big difference between small businesses, and we could do an entire podcast all about what's the difference between big and small. Firstly, they really care about, they're very passionate about what they do, and they have a great deal of pride in this creation. I mean, it's like giving birth. You've brought up this child from birth all the way through to the adolescent years and the troublesome argumentative years. And if you're lucky enough to have a business that's fully formed and is mostly operating, standing on its own 2 feet without too many changes from you or input from you, that's a wonderful place to be. And there's a real desire to, people talk about work-life balance. I think that's a pretty old-fashioned term now, but it's about that autonomy, and it's about having control and seeing something grow and having pride in what it is that you do. And that's a big difference. Another big difference is the way that small businesses look after people. A lot of the traineeships or apprenticeships or interns, a lot of them go through small businesses, and I think there needs to be an acknowledgement in the community of how much training they do of the next generation, especially in regional areas, because again, they can make a quick decision and say, yep, mate, why don't you just come along and work in the business for a couple of days a week and you could start next week. That doesn't happen in corporate Australia. You've got like a million interviews and pieces of paper to fill in and workplace health and safety regulation videos to watch before you can even start. So I think there's that adaptability and the speed of thinking and speed of the way that you can make business decisions quickly. But there's also the burden of regulation and making sure that you're ticking all those boxes for each individual person that you deal with, whether it's a contractor or an employee. So there's definitely positives and negatives, but I think that where the mindset is that small businesses are proud of the work that they do, of the contribution that they make, and there needs to be more of an acknowledgement of that by government and not just keep calling them the backbone of the economy.
I think if I look at the small business owners that we talk to or that we have as clients, I think they just most of them that I speak to anyway, block out all the outside noise. and they just come back to basics and go, what is my business and how am I going to make profit and how am I going to be successful?
Yes.
And they just and it's just that positive mindset and just being, I hate that word resilient, but they're just resilient regardless of, COVID and whatever other crap is out there. They just focus on what they need to do to be successful. And we say all the time that business is not just a business, it's people's livelihood. Like it's their family, it's their kids, it's their mortgage, it's their home loan, it's their car loan, it's their holidays, it's whatever. So it's more than just this this business. It's their livelihood and it's everything. And I think that's why the ones that we speak to anyway are so just strong around what they do and just focus on all the stuff that they can control, not the stuff that they can't.
Yeah, that's right. And they should, and hopefully through podcasts like yours, that they know that if there's something they're not sure of or that they need to get advice on, that they get that help elsewhere, that they don't try and do everything themselves. You have to do that at the beginning because you might not have the finances to be able to pay for the right advice. But as you grow, understanding, well, actually, maybe I don't know everything there is to know about, this element. Maybe I need to start getting some advice from outside to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. It is really important that small businesses are compliant for a whole range of reasons. If nothing else, it's important that everyone's fair and equitable because we don't want to see uncompetitive tension in the market. You don't want to see people underpaying their workers while you're struggling to make sure you're paying every single cent of the allowances and everything else correctly and on time. And you've got people who are doing the wrong thing. That's just, it's inequitable and unfair. So you want to have a fair marketplace. That's really critical. And part of that is having good advisors in the marketplace to be able to make sure everyone's doing the right thing as well.
Yep, cool. So when you you had your business before COSBOA and then you've kind of rejigged it and doing it again now. So were there bits and pieces of marketing that you did then or now to help kind of promote your business?
Well, yeah. And this is what's really interesting because the podcast began as, I guess, a way of marketing the bookkeeping practice. So I had a bookkeeping practice that I was running and the podcast.
Right.
And I was kind of using the podcast in the beginning to say, hey, I'm the expert and I'm local and let me help you with your business. But it very quickly morphed into, I think, me tapping into my sense of curiosity. I wanted to answer the questions that my clients were asking, but I didn't want to provide those services. I want to say, well, if you want advice on international trade, here's where you go to get more information.
Right.
And I wanted that advice to come to them. And it quickly became more about the advocacy and less about the advertising. I have to say, like most small business owners, I was kind of a bit crappy at my website. My website was about like 7 years old at one stage. It was even talking about software platforms that I wasn't even using anymore. And I think you go down different rabbit holes. You think, oh, I'll try that for an income stream. And at one stage I was trying to run workshops and they're really not viable and it's very difficult to get bums on seats. So I very quickly pulled back from that, realizing that although I can deliver the information, if I can't get at least 50 people in the room, which is hard, probably not worth my while. So you explore different things. And I think sometimes you go down rabbit holes and you kind of leave a bit of your IP somewhere behind you. You don't tidy those things up. And, there's lots of great ways that you can market your business. I tried to do it using podcasts, but then I got distracted because I wanted to be an advocate.
Yeah. Love it.
So for me, my bookkeeping practice just sort of grew organically. And that's mainly because, as you can probably tell from my personality, I'm a serial networker. I love meeting people and finding out about their businesses. And that worked for me as my marketing was I'd go to the opening of an envelope. Anything I could get to that was a networking event within spitting distance of my house, I would go to. I didn't care how many people were there. I'd always attend, and you just sort of build up that reputation slowly and get people to know you. And there's ways to fast track that. There's networking groups that will enforce members to support one another financially. I prefer to do it in the organic way where you're actually building a reputation with those around you and referrals. You ask clients to sort of say, hey, if you like my services, could you recommend someone? I tried to do a bit of a referral program where I said, you can have X number of dollars off your next invoice if you refer me, but I got lazy with that and distracted again. And it's difficult because marketing is just one of the hats you're wearing when you're running a business.
Absolutely. And without plugging what we do, it's so important that and it's what we do 101. It's about creating that plan and at least trying to stick to that plan, have someone to help you to execute it. But at least having that structure initially. Plans will always evolve. That's just the nature of marketing and what works and what doesn't. And as you said, seeing and measuring what's doing. You also mentioned something about doing stuff that's comfortable. So I'm going to talk in a few weeks at a franchise business that's got all their franchisees coming for their annual conference. And I was preparing the other day for it. And one of the things I'm talking about is doing stuff that you're physically comfortable doing. And it's what we encourage our clients as well. So don't, like you just said, networking, right? So if you're not a comfortable networker, don't do it. Like put me on a stage to talk to 100 people. I love it. Put me in a room to network. I hate it. Right. And I think it's because if I'm on stage, I'm talking about marketing and I know it so well. So I'm in my comfort zone, but to go around network and small talk, it's just not my thing. So it's about doing things that you're comfortable doing. If you like posting on social, do it. If you don't and you're not comfortable, then don't, or get over it and do stuff that you are comfortable with. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
I think that as well as having advisors like yourself, it's really valuable to have that advice from other people in your world, in your industry. And a lot of industry associations will provide tips that are quite specific to whatever it is that you're doing. So say, you're a small retail butcher in a shopping centre, they might have some advice that says, think about, is there a local paper that is published? Is there a local community notice board? Is there a local school that needs sausages for their next barbecue? If you're going to give them the sausages, make sure that you're also getting some marketing from them to say that you did that, and maybe a certification of appreciation to go on your wall. It's also...
Love it.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think that a lot of it with marketing is thinking about what's the end result. So it's not just about giving the sausages, it's saying, well, what am I getting back from that? And networking is you're building a relationship with the other person. You're not setting any expectations that they're going to be a client, but you might follow up with them in a couple of weeks and go, what did you think? I think my golden tip is always ask for advice. So I've never had, of the hundreds and hundreds of meetings that I've had, in the last 10 years, again, I will meet with everybody and just to chew the fat and find out what's happening in their business or get their advice on something. But to say to someone, I'm launching a website or I'm doing some branding work, can I get your advice? Nobody will say no. Everybody loves to have their opinion heard and everybody appreciates being listened to. So if you say to someone, look, I've got some business ideas and I was wondering if I could possibly run them past you or buy your coffee. It's the cost of a coffee, and you're basically getting people's advice. And it's great. It's a great way to network if you'd rather do one-on-ones. But it's an extension of that. You go to the networking event, you play the cards game. Don't not have cards. I don't understand. Nobody has cards anymore. It's madness. You get a card, have a funky shape. First of all, it's something you can talk about. But secondly, it's a brand reminder. Like people don't have card boxes anymore.
Have you seen the new digital cards now?
No, I hate digital cards. Yeah. I've got these 2 cards sitting on my desk. Yeah. And they've been sitting there for ages and I keep on glancing at them. Every time I glance at them, I'm reminded of who that person is and what services it is that they provide, and maybe a way that we can work together, or maybe, some way that I can give them some business.
I've got one on my desk as well. I won't show the name, but I'm the same. I'm like, I need to contact that person. There's a reason why, but I'm leaving it there. They're
brand reminders, and as long as they're environmentally friendly. So my top tip: do not get matte cellar glaze. It is evil. It means that the things can't be recycled. So you want just a cardboard finish. Yes, it's not going to last 100 years, but neither is your business. But so it's having those brand reminders that you hand over, and it can be a talking point, but also it lives on people's desks. They lie around, and it's good if you're trying to get corporate work as well, because they go, we don't do cards anymore. It's like, yeah, but I do, and this is going to sit on your desk forever.
Very good. Love it. It's very tangible. That's what we like.
Yes.
Small businesses don't like all the top level crap. They just want, what can I physically do? Speaking of the strategic top level stuff, that's really important to do first before you do the bits and pieces at the bottom. So if we talk about your business, and maybe you haven't thought about this yet, but for Small Biz Matters, we talk about positioning. So what I mean by positioning is, how are you positioning your business and your brand in the minds of your potential customers that is different to the competition? So have you thought about how you're going to start positioning the revamping of your business in the minds of your customers and clients?
Yeah, and mine's a tricky one, because I think this is the same for a lot of consultants. You want to do the same work as what you were doing previously. You know what your skill set is. Very difficult to articulate when you've got such a minutia product, and it's your IP, it's what's in your head that's of value. How do you put that into a website? Very tricky. It's very difficult. And I've got to say, with my website, I probably actually started with my CV. So I sort of started redoing my CV, because when you run a business, you don't have a CV. So for 8 years, I didn't have one. And then when I left COSBOA, I was like, oh, okay, so I guess that's kind of what I got to do now. So I played around with that, got some great advice from some career counselors, and then really started to articulate the CV. And then I thought, but I don't want a job. I would like to go into consulting, because it's very unique, and I couldn't even find a job description that even matched what I did. So you take that information that you had in your CV, and then you can't just chat GPT it. You've got to let things sit with you, and they've got to feel right. And then you've got to work on your website for a while, and then walk away from it, and not get your mother to look at it. There's another one. Don't get anyone who it can be a bit devastating. But come back to it yourself with fresh eyes. Look at it again. Make some tweaks. Before you publish, you've just got to allow things to sit with you. And in the meantime, things are happening in the background. You're having conversations, and that might evolve your marketing piece a little bit more. I mean, that website is just so critical for you to put it out there. And it's hard when you're a consultant to articulate what you know that your skill set is, and then put it into some sort of a coherent website that makes sense to people who are looking at it from the outside.
I'm happy to have a coffee with you and give you some advice if you like. There you go.
That would be great. Yes, I'll buy you a coffee.
There you go.
But thank you. And I think that's it is difficult, especially when you're moving into a new way of working. If you are a BAS agent bookkeeper like I was, it's a clear-cut, fairly defined role. You can do the right training, you know what you need to do, the services are that you need to provide. The challenge there is, how do you niche yourself and make yourself look different from the competition? Yep. If you're completely different from the competition, because there is no competition, because nobody really does what you do, the difficulty is defining what you do.
Yeah, that's absolutely. We hear that all the time. And the biggest obstacle then, it's a great position to be in, because you're essentially starting a new category, which is the place you want to be. The challenge for that is no one knows that category exists. So you need to educate people and say, this is a new offering, and this is what we do, and this is how we help you. So absolutely, that's a challenge. It's a good thing, but it's a challenge as well.
Yeah, and positioning yourself as the expert in a new field and saying, I can help you with this, but I need to have, there's a lot of, it's sort of like the 1 to 100. You've got to have 100 meetings where you explain what it is you do before someone goes, oh, I can see how I can actually utilize that. Everyone appreciates what you do and thinks it's great. Yep. But it's, how can I use that within my corporate, my government, my, not-for-profit organization to really use those skills to build X.
Yeah, for sure. So it sounds like there's a bit of work to be done on your positioning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's been a few months to get there. You're the marketing expert, so awesome. I will get you to do an analysis and you can tell me.
Perfect. So in terms of all the business owners that you deal with, what do you see in terms of a couple of characteristics of the successful ones?
I think that it sort of depends on the industry. I think the more cutthroat industries work better for people who have more of an attitude where it's water off a duck's back. Other industries, you can be more successful if you are more empathetic and you really take on board the trials and tribulations of your clients, because you also are a sounding board / psychologist for them as well. It really depends on the industry. And sometimes it's technical. Sometimes your expertise is what you're good at because you can use the machinery, or you can, you are a specialist at being an electrical engineer, for instance. I think it depends on the industry in terms of what those strengths are. But certainly a unified strength is tenacity is just keeping on going. I mean, we keep on hearing those statistics. If you look at the recent report from the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman, there's some fascinating figures in there. But so many small businesses owners, I should say, don't earn, they earn under the award wage, the annual award wage. And they just keep going because this is what they want to do. And there's a multitude of reasons for that. Some people don't want full-time work. Some people are caring for someone in their family that needs support. Some people, might have kids doing their HSC and just like, my kids need me right now. I think it depends on the circumstances, but certainly no matter what those decisions are, all of them have tenacity, either to back themselves or to continue down the road that they're going on despite not being millionaires, or going down the road because it's going to make them a millionaire and they're cutthroat and they don't care who they take down as they go along the road. It just takes all sorts. It's like saying, what makes someone a good member of society? Oh, that depends.
Yeah, for sure. In your career and business, is there a single person that stands out and you say, I'm really thankful and grateful for that individual person?
No, because I've had so many twists and turns.
Okay.
There was someone who was a lecturer at uni when I was studying to be a dance drama teacher. There was someone who, when I was teaching in London, who saw an ability in me to look after a department of children who had behavioural difficulties, which was completely random. So I think that as you go down those paths, it's really just who believes in you and who supports you, but also the people. You also need the people who are going to tell it straight.
Sure.
And sometimes you can be in highly stressful situations where you're not really listening to that. And sometimes you can be in situations where you don't want to listen to that because you know best. I think it just evolves. And for me, there's not one single person, if you will, but there's been many people who have mentored me, but also many people who have inspired me.
Yeah.
All those businesses through COVID, all those people through COVID who put the needs of their family and their employees first and took a massive pay cut because they needed to make sure they didn't let their employees go. The business owners who kept on paying their cleaners because they knew that if they didn't pay them, they weren't going to survive. It's those people that looked after one another and that really inspire me to keep going and to keep advocating for that group of such an important part of society.
Yeah, wow. We could almost finish the podcast on that because that was awesome. Highest moment in your career so far? Is there one particular or a couple?
Attending the Jobs and Skills Summit and representing small businesses in the highest caliber of business, union and government leaders in the country. Yeah, wow. I was very proud of that moment, having the opportunity to be surrounded by the most important leaders in the country, but also being able to represent and advocate for small businesses on two spaces where I was able to speak on a couple of topics, and just elevating the importance of small businesses and maintaining that importance of an organisation like COSBOA. That for me was the absolute pinnacle.
That's so cool. Love it. Is there, if you look back or go back in time, anything that you do differently in your career or business?
I often say that I wish I'd studied journalism.
Okay, why is that?
Because I like doing podcasts and I like doing radio and I like talking to people and having those conversations and drawing out of them their strengths or their weaknesses, or having conversations like the one you're having now. I really enjoyed that. But when I left school, journalism was really difficult to get into, and I was also quite stubborn and didn't want to leave Sydney, so wasn't an option. And also was keen and wanting to start some sort of a career. I didn't know what it was. I think I wish I'd got to where I was now sooner. I wish I'd understood that my value is in advocacy and what a career in advocacy looks like. But then again, I wouldn't have had all those life experiences that make me a good advocate to get me to that point. So No real major regrets at all. I think everything just builds you up to where you are, and as long as you're a good human and you look after the community that you live in, that's critical, and you're not selfish, then how can you have any regrets?
So true. Any one piece of final tangible advice or words of wisdom for small business owners, Alexi?
I think just keep doing what you're doing. There's certainly, we're in a really difficult patch at the moment, not just because of the economic conditions, but because the continued burden that keeps coming down the pipeline, the changes, things that are happening to businesses that small businesses don't even know that they're supposed to do. It's very, very difficult. And get involved with advocacy. Find out who speaks for you in your local community. Get to know your local counsellors on council and find out what they're doing to help you and your clients in your local area and what they're doing to build up business in your community. Speak to your local MP, tell them what it is that you do, and join your professional association and find out how you can learn from them, but get involved, be on a committee, have your voice heard. Everybody who is a small business owner is a leader. They are a community leader. They do things to help their community, whether it's your industry or the community in which you live, or your business associates that are your team that you work with to build your business. We're all leaders. And I think that it's critical that the small businesses step into that role because it's better than having a job.
Yeah, sounds good. Nice final words of wisdom. Alexi, thank you so much for today. That was such a wealth of knowledge, your experience, all the people you've dealt with, the knowledge that you have. No doubt listeners would have got so much out of today. So thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure, Michael. It's been a really great chat. I've loved every minute of it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Just a reminder, to get even more out of today's episode, go to the show notes to find the link or visit littlemarketing.com.au where you can download a worksheet with the key points discussed in today's episode. This is so that you can make your own notes around some of the things discussed, get your marketing moving and start implementing. Again, thanks for listening and have a great day. Please note that all the information provided on this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to be specific advice to your individual situation. Please be sure to engage a professional for a customized approach to your business and personal circumstances.